The subject is hauntings, attachments, oppression, and possession. My name is Paula, and I am the resident paranormal investigator. So wanted to, you guys, if you've ever tuned in to one of the live streams or watched one after it's been recorded and posted to the group, you'll know that I usually start everything with a disclaimer, throw a disclaimer in the middle, and I end with a great big disclaimer at the very end. A lot of what I'm going to tell you is not meant to scare you. It is not meant to make you think that you have a spirit attachment or that you have a demon possession, because attachments and possessions have a lot of symptoms that are in common with some mental illnesses, some medical conditions, and things like of that nature. So I don't want everybody to automatically assume that a condition that you or a loved one that is suffering from is automatically related to the paranormal because of the information that I'm giving you tonight. I am not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor. I don't claim to diagnose you or anything like that. I'm a paranormal investigator, and I'm a fair psychic medium. And, you know, I want to make it clear that this information is not meant to scare you. It's not meant to make you look in the shadows in the corners of your house and make you think that you've got some, you know, some boogeyman going after you. So I want to kind of go over exactly what a haunting is and what it can be. Most hauntings, I'm going to say like 80% of what the lay person refers to as paranormal activity in their home, and they attribute it to something otherworldly, is actually fairly easily explained by something that's very mundane. In other words, it's something of this world and not paranormal. One of the most common things that can cause a lot of symptoms that are related to hauntings, possessions, oppression, and things of that nature are high EMF, either in the home or in the area. So if you live next to or very near one of those high towers for transmitting electricity, utility towers or anything like that, cell phone towers, if you're living near one of those give off extremely high EMF. EMF, which we discussed, I think 2 weeks ago, is electronic magnetic forces. The earth gives them off naturally, and it's also given off by your appliances in your home, by anything that's electrical in nature. So the most common sources of EMF are, you know, faulty wiring and appliances in the home. So EMF itself has been linked to certain psychiatric conditions. They have been linked to causing night terrors and nightmares and hallucinations. We actually, Alex and I actually did an investigation on a townhome in Winchester, where the HVAC unit was located directly above a young man's bedroom and was putting off a lot of EMF into the bedroom. And he was having a lot of, you know, nightmares and such like that. And we told her that she really needed, because of the amount of EMF that was being given off by this HVAC unit, she really needed to get an electrician in there because we didn't think that it was grounded properly. We've also investigated a property in Culpeper where the panel to the main panel to the house itself was not properly grounded. So it's like the entire house was giving off EMF. There's also can be faulty wiring in your electrical panel can give it off, any number of things. And I've also found like cheap china, like water fountains and tchotchkes that have like a transformer on it, things that are not actually UL listed, they can give off a tremendous amount of EMF. And if you happen to have one of those located near your head where you sleep, and having your cell phone next to your head, cordless phones next to your head, that can also cause the nightmares, the night terrors, the night paralysis, the dream paralysis, and things like that. So those are things to consider when those kinds of symptoms manifest, is, to start look around for a mundane explanation for that, rather than automatically assuming that, something's coming after you in your dream, et cetera, et cetera. Not having things not properly grounded is a very large source of EMF in the home. Another thing that is can be related to a lot of hauntings are mental illnesses, such as bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, and PTSD flares. And especially if the patient either is refusing to take medication or has suddenly stopped their medication, that can cause, nightmares, night terrors, the night paralysis, everything like that. I myself have PTSD, and I know that when I'm having a really bad PTSD flare, then I can sometimes have those really bad nightmares and night terrors, and they're of this realm, not otherworldly. Another thing that we have found that is very common in determining this is people who are either active in the use or abuse of prescription and illicit drugs, and other mind-altering substances like alcohol. And it could even go to prior use of certain drugs because they're stored in fat cells. Some drugs, like PCP, angel dust, that kind of stuff, when your body metabolizes that drug, it's stored in a fat cell, rather than being flushed out of your body, like through, water, through your urine. It's actually stored up. So your body can release that. If you burn that fat cell, it's going to release that drug back into your system. Plus if it's a chronic abuser, especially, alcohol and narcotics, they can cause, how can I put it, impact to brain function. So that's another thing that we have found can contribute to people thinking that they have a haunt. We can relate it to also repairs that are needed in your home, such as repairing your door. Like if a door is improperly balanced, it will, not shut properly. It'll pop open. It'll swing by itself. Shutters that, especially, like we have, storm shutters and like throughout the South for, hurricane shutters. If they're broken and they're flopping around in the wind, banging on the side of the house, that's another one. Also, one case that we had, the homeowner said she heard thumping, felt thumping underneath her bedroom, and it was scaring her. And come to find out, it was the foundation vents to the crawl space were broken, and they were just flapping around and not functioning properly, you know, and all she had to do was get that foundation vent fixed, and there went her ghosty under the house. Old paint and the VOCs that are volatile organic compounds that it off gases, like lead paint, can also lead to nightmares and things like that. Mold, especially black mold, can manifest itself, making you think that, you know, you've got ghosties in the house. Gas leaks and high carbon monoxide in your house can also do that. Let's see, animals seeking shelter. Again, a house that we investigated, they heard scratching underneath the house. And what it was, when Alex crawled underneath the house, was a cat that had literally scratched the insulation from the underneath side, on the underneath side of one of the joists down to shield itself from the weather. I know that, you know, we have skunks and raccoons and everything like that around here. One night when Dwight came home, there was a skunk sitting on my front porch. So those types of animals like to burrow and hide under porches, you know, crawl spaces and stuff like that. So things that go bump underneath your house, that's when we start looking for critters too. Matrixing of light in pictures. Those of you that are members of the group know that, you know, I'm always asking, where's the light source? What kind of camera did you use? Blah, 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 blah. Because most of what people think are spirit orbs are actually dust particles where light is reflecting off of it and it's matrixing or pixelating. So that's also another source that people mistakenly think that is paranormal, that's very easily explained by something in the mundane world. The last thing that I really want to mention goes with the medical kind of thing, and that's scratches or hives resulting from insect infestations. We had a case out in the Front Royal area where a young boy had scratches and would have hives, et cetera, et cetera. Come to find out, when we looked at his bed, there were fleas in the bed from, I can't remember if he had a gerbil or a rat. It was some kind of rodent. And the cage, the bedding, came with fleas. So once they got rid of the fleas, those, you know, demonic scratching and hives and itchies went away. So, Alex said it was rats. I knew it was some kind of rodent that I was like, okay, not something that I really want in my house. So now we can go on and actually, now that we've kind of like debunked 80% of the stuff that a paranormal investigator would typically see or hear about, you know, when we're sitting down and conducting an interview, I want to talk about, there are several categories of the type of haunting that are out there. And the first one that I want to talk about is a residual haunting. And what a residual haunting is, it's energy that is stored. Most people believe that, you know, places and retain the energy of an event, especially a traumatic event. And a residual haunt is like a movie that plays over and over and over. It doesn't vary. There's no interaction with you or responses from you. It can be a visual, audio, olfactory, or tactile. In other words, you can see, hear, smell, or feel it. And it can be, most of these residual hauntings are dormant for years. And then there's a specific event that may trigger it. And that could be like remodeling of a home or remodeling of, you know, a hotel or building or somewhere that's had a traumatic event in that property. Now, the most common type of, you know, or the most well-known residual haunts have to do with battlefields, and especially Gettysburg. There are the numerous accounts, actually at the visitor center in Gettysburg. They have file cabinets full of visitors that have had paranormal experience there in Gettysburg. I myself have had a residual haunt, so to speak, experience in Gettysburg. My ex-husband and I were Civil War reenactors, and we were driving into Gettysburg up Steinwehr Avenue, and I looked over to the left as we were coming into town, and there was a Confederate color guard right there, and they were looking rather bedraggled and rather authentic. And I looked at my ex and I said, "Do you see that?" He's like, "Yeah." And then as we passed, I turned around and they were gone. So it's very common to have things like that. You know, then they have the woman of Spangler Springs. They have, and I've seen, personally experienced at Little Round Top, being on the top of Little Round Top where the 20th Maine was. You could honestly see the Confederate line coming up through the trees and advancing on the position, and you could smell the sulfur from cannon fire. If you've ever been around, you know, artillery fire after a shell's been shot, there's a very distinct smell of the gunpowder. And that's very common up there, and it happens every night. It's the same thing over and over and over again. So that is what a residual haunt is. There's also what is a poltergeist. And a lot of experts don't really consider poltergeist to be a haunting per se. But what a poltergeist actually is a misdirection of energy that is very destructive, and it's channeled through a human being. And that human is usually a preteen or a teen girl that is early into puberty or just starting puberty. And it's an involuntary thing. They don't even know that they're doing it. And the common activity associated with a poltergeist, and, you know, it's different than, you know, the movie Poltergeist. So don't rely on Hollywood for your information about that. Common poltergeist activity is the opening and closing of doors, rearranging objects in a room, things flying off the shelf in a room, loud noises, thumps, or even shrieks, offensive odors, usually, you know, like a smell of sewage or sulfur, and then interference with electronic devices. So, you know, cell phones going wonky, like little toys activating on their own, stuff like that. And they're usually very, very random in occurrence. And they're not that common. What most people think about when they say, you know, they have a haunted house, is what we call an intelligent haunt, or an active haunt. And those are cases where the spirit tries to communicate with you. The spirit can be someone who is trapped on this realm. It can be someone who has moved on that can freely travel between realms. And it can also be someone that does not realize that they're dead. It could also be somebody that has like unfinished business. Their activities are usually related to an attempt to communicate with you and get your attention. And they usually do that through electronics, through noises, thumps, voices, things of that nature. And the one thing you've got to remember, just because you may have a spirit doesn't mean that it's bad. Because if a person was a good person in life, they're going to be a good person in spirit. If they were a butthead in life, they're going to be a butthead in spirit. So that's pretty much, the rule of thumb. You can set boundaries with spirit and get along with having a ghost in the house and be perfectly happy and not have anything really go wrong. It's not a big thing. I know for me, when I'm particularly bothered about something, I smell Salem cigarettes and I hear the click of a Zippo and I know my dad is here. And my sister and my mom and my dad leave change for me, that kind of stuff. So, just because you may have an active haunt or an intelligent haunt doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. There is a subset of an intelligent haunt that is called a doppelganger, and these are very, very rare. And what that is seeing an exact copy of yourself. And usually the sighting is limited to the person that actually sees them, that person's mirror image. And doppelganger in German means double walker. Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R. Me and my accent, boy, it's terrible. There are also what are called shadow hauntings or shadow people. And these are the ones that really tend to freak people out. We're going to have a whole episode on that, on shadow people later on, because people really want more information about shadow people. So I'm just staying really high level here with this, because we're going to go into a lot more detail in another episode of BYO Spirit and Everything Paranormal. But a shadow person typically manifests as small, like 3 to 4 feet tall is what you usually see. They are lightning fast. They appear out of the corner of your eye, in your peripheral vision. They are very dark form. No light goes through them. So like a traditional, apparition, you can usually see through them. Whereas a shadow person, it's just straight dark. You can't see through them. They're opaque. They usually have no facial features. Most of them, a lot of them can appear with like a hat or a cloak on. Sometimes they make themselves appear taller. Most of the time, shadow people do not attempt to communicate. However, there are some times when they do communicate, and you can actually get EVPs from a shadow person. And my buddy Alex has, actually caught EVPs from a shadow person. So, they're a little tricky to deal with, and they are really hard to document in any kind of an investigation because they are so fast, and because you don't usually see them, and they don't usually really try and communicate with you that much. The one that really, Alex is typing something to me. So hold on a second here. Type faster, Alex. I'm moving on. Yeah, Alex had direct voice communication, asked a question, and he got a direct response back. And I'm going to try and see if I can figure out a way to share the information, get it from him, and share the information in the group during the episode on shadow people, because it is so difficult to get any kind of documentation of a shadow person because they are so fast and because they usually do not give you EVPs and stuff. The last kind of haunting that I want to go over is the one that scares people the most, and that is a demonic haunting. And that's an evil energy. They can appear to be very frightening and assume a horrific shape or form with glowing eyes, kind of stuff. It can also appear in a non-threatening form. In other words, a lot of times demons can appear as a child, especially to another child, to lure you in, so that they can attach, oppress, and then possess you in the long run. Because most people think that, a child spirit won't hurt you. So they're tricksters, just by their nature. And they really wreak havoc on someone's life. And the end goal is to take that person's life. So they're usually thought to emerge through a gateway, portal, or ley line. And there are naturally occurring gateways, portals, and ley lines are all over the earth. And there are also things that are called nexuses, which are kind of like big whirlpools of energy. But they can also be related to black or dark magic, satanic rituals, and God bless the Ouija board. That's another episode we're going to have. And that's about Ouija boards and gateways and portals. They can appear to be an intelligent haunting. So, like I said, they start out, interacting with a human, but then things escalate. They often can manifest with scratches, and you have to remember things that happen in 3, because 3 to a demon is a mocking of the Holy Trinity. And they can also manifest like with things dripping down the wall, marks on your wall, stuff like that. And it can also be through personal attacks. In other words, shoving, pushing, slapping, scratching, things like that. And actual demonic activity is not that common for a paranormal investigator to find. However, Alex and I did have a case in Mechanicsville, Virginia. It was definitely, there was 2 entities there. One was your kind of typical butthead spirit that was a butthead in life, so they were a butthead in spirit, but the other was a demon. And we were doing a cleansing on the house at the homeowner's request. It was a minor rite of exorcism. The child was being in the house, was being scratched. The grandmother was being scratched. They shared a room. So we went through with the homeowner and we did a cleansing and a blessing of the house and everything. And there was this black mass that went down the spiral staircase And or we told the homeowners exactly what not to do, and they didn't listen, and they did exactly what we told them not to do, and what we had gotten rid of then literally came back with the vengeance of hell on their mind. And we told them that they needed to contact the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church then turned around and called Alex. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen episodes of Ghost Adventures with Father Dave Daly, or Daly, D-A-L-Y. He is one of the exorcists in the United States. And Father Dave Daly is the one who spent a few hours with Alex reviewing all the evidence that we got, the EVPs that we got, what was going on, the whole 9 yards. And I'm going to go over this case a little bit more when we get into like attachments and things like that. They can really wreak havoc on your life. And it takes a rite of exorcism to get rid of them in most cases, because they are so persuasive that by the time you realize what's going on with you, you need help. You can't get rid of it yourself, and your free will is being affected. So now what I want to get into are the different stages of haunting, and that comes into the attachments, oppression, and possession. And I'm going to use a fire department term, the incipient stages, which in the very beginning of everything is called an infestation. And this can be either with spirit or demonic in nature. And when you get that feeling that something is just off, it's not right, you're experiencing cold spots, you hear scratching sounds, objects being misplaced and showing up in random or absurd spots, like all of a sudden, you hung your keys up on the, regular hook, and then you turn around, they're gone, and then a day later you find them in your freezer, something like that. Infestation stage can last days, weeks, months, until it progresses and advances to another stage. It can also involve you hearing voices, seeing shadows, physical manifestation of spirit. In other words, something showing itself to you in a form that either can scare you or not scare you. I was going to say, everybody's being really quiet. You're starting. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. It can smells, especially smells of raw sewage. That's usually not a good thing. Interaction with a full-blown apparition. Again, capturing a full-blown apparition and seeing a full-blown apparition is very rare, but we've done it. And it can also make you think that you've got like poltergeist activity or poltergeist-like activity. And like I said, a lot of these things that I'm getting ready to tell you can also be attributed to medical conditions. It can be attributed to mental health conditions. It can be very, very scary. I'm not meaning to scare you and freak you out. I'm just meaning to give you information. So, I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but I want to give you the information because you guys did express a big interest in this subject area. So the next part is where it does get kind of scary, and that's the attachment phase. Now, a spirit, or what an attachment is a spirit or other entity, and it does not necessarily have to be demonic. It can be an other world, what I call an otherworldly entity, like, an elemental or something like that. And it attaches to a human host. And usually it does that because it wants to know either what a human form feels like. No, PK is something different. But because PK is created by somebody, almost like poltergeist activity. And then we'll cover that one in what PK is. But PK is attached. Somebody creates that. It's energy that's created by a human that, you think is a ghost, but it's actually an energy that is created by a human and then broadcast out. And that PK stands for psychokinetic, I believe. So the spirit or entity wants to know what it's like to be human, or to remember what it was like to be human. Because you got to think that other entities like demons, and such, have never had human form. So they want to know what it's like, or they have held human form by possession and they want to do it again because they like it. It's also an attachment can often be spirit seeking help, and trying to contact the living for help. And the host often experiences the spirit's death state. This has happened to me. I think I mentioned this in an earlier broadcast, but I had done a first impression. I live very near Manassas Battlefield in Northern Virginia, and we have a Confederate cemetery downtown. And what they do, in October is they have ghost walks, and they, do little scenes through the cemetery from, people in Manassas history that are famous and everything like that. And one of the graves in the Confederate cemetery was desecrated. In other words, the soldiers' bones were stolen. They were never recovered. They never figured out who did it. And I did a first-person impression of this soldier's wife. And he liked me so much, he followed me home. I did not have my normal protections because I was so focused on doing a proper, period correct Civil War impression with my dress, my mannerisms, my jewelry, and things like that. I didn't even think about really shielding myself and protecting myself in that cemetery. Dumb me. And he followed me home. And I had the symptoms that he had from his injuries that he sustained in the Civil War. He had a shattered shoulder and lost use of one of his arms, and his right lung was collapsed. So, back then they couldn't reinflate the lung, so he had trouble breathing. And it took me like a day to figure out what was going on. And had to send him on his own little merry way. Alex and I have brought spirits back home with us, brought spirit back from the battlefield, things of that nature. So it's very easy, especially for paranormal investigators, to get an attachment. And that's one thing, that the entities often seek to drain the energy of the host, and it's like they feed off of it. So that's one of the things that you've got to be aware of. Now, the people that are the most at risk for having an attachment are paranormal investigators, just because of the nature of what they do and what they're around, psychics and mediums, but experienced psychics and mediums know how to shield themselves. So, but even then, you can develop an attachment if you're not diligent in what you're doing. A novice or a sensitive who does not really realize that they have ability is a perfect target for attachment, because, psychic mediums are like, they are the bright light, and children are, that innocent bright light, and they're very attractive to spirit. People who dabble in the occult or spirit activities. So, last week, the last things I said, do not do investigations in your own home, and do not ever burn, a Ouija board or a haunted object. Well, this is it. This is why, because the energies and things that have come through those or attached to those, if you try and destroy them and mishandle them, can attach to you and do it very quickly. It's dabblers in occult or spirit activities. So, especially like with teenagers who read a book and like the I can't even say it, Necronomicon, and I know I mispronounced that, which is like it's a work of fiction, but it's like, full of these spells and rituals to control the dead. And when you start doing stuff like that, you're asking for trouble, because they don't know how to shield themselves. They don't know what they're doing. People who have emotional, mental health, or other health issues are more at risk. And that is because, especially if a physical condition, you're already run down. Your body is not at, peak performance. So you're already weakened in that state. The same thing with mental health. I know when I have a PTSD flare that I am more vulnerable, especially, after I've had insomnia and I've been up for 72 hours and I'm just totally run down. I know that I am extremely vulnerable for attack, and I really have to double down protections. I have even asked Marta to kind of like have my psychic back. And she has, lifted me up and protected me when I needed it. And Marta is exactly right. Your vibration is lower. So you're not able to protect yourself where you would normally be okay. People with a history of drug or alcohol abuse, and I touched on that earlier, you're more susceptible. A history, when you are really deep into drugs and alcohol, it leaves an imprint on your aura. And, your aura is outside of your etheric body, which is like, a couple of inches out from your body. And then out from that is your aura. And your aura is what protects your psyche, and basically protects your soul. So when you abuse your body and abuse your psyche through substance abuse, alcohol abuse, it leaves a permanent impact on your aura, and it makes you more susceptible for possession, etc. it is mainly earthbound spirits that are responsible for attachments. Now, an attachment can also be a human, and I call them psychic vampires. And you need to remember, when we come to the earthbound spirit, if they were a butthead in life, they're going to be a butthead in spirit. So it's going to be a butthead that tries to attach to you, not usually a good person. The only time that a good person would try to attach to you is to try and getting help to like solve their murder, something like that, or to get help with unfinished business. You can have an attachment from non-human entities. And so this is something, and I say this because it's, something that has never been incarnated into the human realm. These attachments can be benign. They can manifest as shadow people. And this includes demons, okay? And then you have that category called elementals. And anybody who is like Native American, has a Native American background, is a witch or a Satanist, they're more familiar with the idea of elementals than most people are. And elementals are related specifically to earth, air, fire, and water. And these are beings that are like physical representations of those elements. And they have usually been invoked during a ritual or occult practice. And then the person didn't know what to do with them, and something, or, their sacred space has been disturbed, like through construction or development of an area. So then they don't have anything there, like an earth elemental gets displaced by construction, and they no longer have trees. They've just got big concrete there. That can be a big thing. And they can be elementals. You will never get rid of them, but you can make peace with them. That's a topic for another day. So, and we're probably going to run over the hour. So, you guys kind of hang in there with me. Alex dropped a link in the chat of a video of a shadow person. And I think it's like around 51, 52, 53 seconds into it. Put it in at like 1/4 speed. If you put it at play it back at regular speed, you're probably not going to see it. But up in the settings in YouTube, change it to 1/4 speed, and you'll be able to see it fairly quick, clearly. Oh, Alex said it didn't take. I posted the link to it in the group earlier, I think last week. So look up there, and I think it's already posted in the group. Now, some of the signs of an attachment, these are really broad statements. And you often, if you have an attachment, you often feel like you're not alone, or somebody's watching you all the time. You can have it manifest as a black mist above you or next to you. Thinking or saying things that are completely out of character when this presence is near. Physical maladies that you've never had before. In other words, joint pain, things of that nature that you've never had, like fibromyalgia or something just all of a sudden manifests. Extreme fatigue, depression, nightmares, and night terrors, and even night paralysis, where you feel like you're being, like held down and stuff. Attachment then goes into the next phase, and infestation goes to oppression. Now, this is when the entity has a fairly good hold on you. And it's been there a while. And the point of oppression is to break the host down to the point of despair and to take away their free will, so that then the parasitic entity or the attachment can take over. So what normally manifests is like a big increase in paranormal activity, like loud noises, unnatural sexual dreams that you never had before. It makes it difficult for the host to sleep, so you get even more run down. Night terrors and more frequent nightmares, and the night paralysis, like the, being held down, becomes more frequent. The target may embrace bad habits that they never had before, like smoking, drug use, alcohol, and things of that nature that are completely out of character. And again, those, especially, drugs and alcohol, make it easier for the entity to control the host and to break them down, okay? Violent behavior that's completely out of character, extreme depression, fits of violence, and thoughts of suicide. Now, like I said, a lot of these symptoms can be related to either a physical malady or mental illness. So don't automatically assume because you're depressed that you've got a spirit attachment or a demonic attachment. Don't make that jump right off the bat. You need to exhaust all the avenues, medically, psychologically, and everything like that before you make that jump to that this is a paranormal related event. And then the final stage is actual possession. And this is when the host's free will is breached and that entity completely takes over. The host will often black out and lose big blocks of time. They'll go around, they'll do things, and they have absolutely no clue what they've done. However, I'll say that Ambien makes me do that, and I go shopping on eBay and stuff when I have to take an Ambien for insomnia, and then stuff shows up, a week later, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? So medication can make you do weird stuff that you're not aware of too. So just, a big caveat there, me and Ambien don't get along because it costs me money. And it's really kind of funny. Had complete hour-long conversations on the phone with my better half and have no recall of it at all. But I had a intelligent conversation with him, and it was all because of Ambien. So the host also feels like they don't have control of their body. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. They feel like they're above and detached, that they sort of know what's going on, but they can't do anything to fix it or break loose. Now, the ultimate goal of possession is to make the host commit suicide or become so emaciated that they die. That's the big goal of a possession. And there's pretty much 3 levels of possession. One is partial influence, and that's, influences through your thoughts and behavior. The host isolates from friends and family. The host becomes obsessed with the entity, or, obsessed with the paranormal. And at this stage, there's still a good chance of getting rid of the entity without having to do a complete, full-blown traditional rite of exorcism. But it's still nothing to joke with. There's a partial possession, and that means that the entity has partial control of a person's mind and their speech, that they have extremely disturbing nightmares, that they're hallucinating, they're hearing voices, they have extreme emotions of anger, guilt, or sadness. The person is fearful to ask for help. And when help is offered, they don't want to take it because the entity is fighting to stay there and stay attached and stay possessed. The host often thinks that if they ignore what's going on, that it'll go away. And these kind of tactics are used to keep the host under control. Then you have what is called a full-blown possession. And the person is not able to function normally in society. And they're often misdiagnosed as with a severe mental illness and locked up in a psychiatric ward from a suicide attempt. So you can see here that there's a lot of things that can go on, and I really do want to touch when I go over the changes that are going on a host person that is being possessed. When I go through these changes, you can also see that if you look up like depression and bipolar disorder, PTSD, and schizophrenia, these are very common symptoms to that. So, don't automatically make that leap that you're possessed by a demon. Get help, from medically, and get help from, a psychiatrist, things like that. So the mental changes that you can really see somebody that is possessed is to look for changes in their personality. Like if somebody that's normally very outgoing becomes very quiet and introverted. Somebody who is very active becomes isolated. Look for changes in their sleep patterns. Look for extreme sudden weight loss or weight gain. Changes in their attitude or behavior. And usually they become hostile. Look to see if they have an aversion to religious objects. This is a pretty telling one. And it could also be like a person who normally would go to church that stops going, or turns their back on the person, on the church. Look for evidence of self-mutilation. Changes in the way the person dresses. Like if normally they're, very modest in their dress, and then suddenly, they're dressed like a hooker on, the corner, that can be a telling indicator. Look for evidence of occult materials in their possession. So do they have a daggone Ouija board in the closet? Something like that. Can you take on a medical condition that they had when in the earth plane? What category does that comes under? An attachment. If they give you what they had on the earthly plane, like he did, he attached to me, that ghost attached to me and made me feel the fact that he had a collapsed lung and a shattered shoulder. I lost use of my left arm, and I couldn't breathe because, my right lung was not inflating properly. He was giving me the symptoms that he experienced in life. So, Marta, did that answer you okay? Okay. Okay. Let's see. Look for destructiveness, especially if they're destroying religious objects. And they may become extremely abusive and threatening, like, if your spouse is usually very easygoing and then all of a sudden is prone to fits of rage. That can be an indicator. They may perform acts of humiliation, like urinating on themselves. Self-mutilation, I think I was touching on that one. Changes in personal hygiene, like if, normally they're one of those that takes 2 or 3 showers a day, and then all of a sudden they don't even want to take a shower once a week, and, they're really grungy, then that can be a sign. Let's see. They can become preoccupied with sex, and obsessed with it. They could take on what appears to be multiple personalities, and you don't really know what you're going to get from day to day. And look for changes in the diet. So like if somebody hates, let's say, dill pickles, and then all of a sudden they want dill pickles on everything, that kind of stuff. Or their favorites are now completely repulsive. Maybe they were peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day for lunch, and then all of a sudden PB&J just makes them throw up and they don't want to have anything to do with it. They may also quit eating completely, and displaying signs of like anorexia or bulimia, that kind of stuff. And they could have blackouts in their memory. And one thing that you really have to kind of be diligent, because children are, like I said earlier, really bright white lights, and they're very attractive to spirit and to demons. So, you have to, has your child been baptized? Or if you're not Christian, have they been, blessed in your, faith in some way? Because like in Wicca, you have a wickening for a child. There are Jewish traditions that children go through, the whole 9 yards. If having a child blessed by, a holy person from your faith can stop the attachments, especially if they've never been like baptized or consecrated or whatever you want to call it in your faith before. Physical changes that can happen with somebody that's being possessed. They can go for long periods of time without blinking their eyes. But this can also be attributed to a neurological condition. Their pupils can be blown and dilated and have that, I call it like black soulless eye look. They can appear like catatonic. But again, that can be related to a mental illness. All of a sudden, the person speaks a language that they've never spoke before, or speak with an unusual accent. If they start speaking in tongues, like just gibberish, the person could also like display almost like seizure activity, where they become completely rigid and you can't move them at all. They're like, a 10-ton weight that you cannot move at all. Look look for, and it's really kind of funny, well, not funny. One of the ladies that Alex and I work with, when she had her son, she developed Bell's palsy. And when a spirit starts to attach to her, that Bell's palsy hits again. And literally, the left side of her face droops. And she, like, it looks like she's having a stroke. But we know then when she does that, that spirit is trying to attach itself or has attached to her. She actually, you guys have probably heard of Moundsville Penitentiary in West Virginia. And, you know, if you can go and watch the, you know, episodes of, I think, Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and I think Paranormal State were there. And there's a part of the penitentiary called the Sugar Shack where where a lot of the murders occurred. And she physically got possessed by spirit in the Sugar Shack. So, you know, you've got to be very careful and look for physical changes. They could also display like superhuman strength. They can all of a sudden develop precognition. In other words, they, you know the future, or they can do retrocognition. In other words, they can see things that happened in the past that they should have no knowledge of. They could maybe able to know something about a person they've never met. They could know what you're thinking. They may move in an unusual way for them. In other words, their gait or the manner in which they walk can change. Writing or symbols may appear on their body, like, you know, scratched in or written on. It can be, you know, welts. Especially if these occur in areas where the person can't normally reach. The person could levitate. That's rare. There could be multiple voices coming from the person at the same time. Their eye color can actually physically change, like go from green to brown. And also you can take note that, you know, normally, like if the animals in the house would normally come up to them and cuddle up to them, and all of a sudden the animals are afraid of the person, you know, that can be a good, you know, indicator also. Now, there are outward manifestations that occur around a person that is possessed. And that can be, I mean, there's a whole host of stuff that can go on. Like objects moving around, they may disappear and then never to be found again. They can also disappear and then be found in another location. Stuff that you've never seen before can appear out of nowhere. Knocking, banging, pounding can be heard throughout the house. Knocks at the door, and usually the knocks occur in threes, because remember, 3 is a mocking of the Holy Trinity. Growling. Religious articles all of a sudden are destroyed. So, you know, normally, like if you have, let's say, a cross hanging on the wall, and all of a sudden the cross falls off the wall and breaks, there you go. You can see odd lights manifest in the room and shoot around the room. Spontaneous fires can happen. Electrical appliances can start up on their own. Let's see, your animals can growl at the person. Any talk of God or religion in general can cause a violent reaction in the person. Sounds of glass breaking, but no actual physical evidence of glass breaking can happen. There can be like having somebody call your name when no one's around. A, a feeling of being watched when there's no one around. There can be like an apparent retaliation after some attempt to stop the attachment has failed. So if somebody has, tried to remove an attachment because they saw somebody on TV do something and they didn't get the entire process for a minor rite of exorcism down, all you're going to do is piss the entity off, and they're going to double down and, go harder on you. And then there can also be like physical attacks. And then there can be psychological attacks. So if somebody, is ashamed about something, they will have an increase in emotion about that particular subject. And it's true, like if you're already depressed or have an anxiety disorder, anything like that, it's magnified if you have an attachment or are going through an oppression. Sexual assaults are very common for people who are possessed. They all of a sudden just, will go after somebody and sexually assault them. And then there's also levitation of people or objects. So what can you look for if something's going on? And some of the triggers are feeling disconnected from yourself, feeling beside yourself or above yourself, but not really present. And those who are psychic mediums or, Wiccan, something like that, we have this thing like being grounded. So feeling chronically ungrounded. In other words, you're just everywhere. You have no center. You have no stable axis to operate on. Being hateful, jealous, greedy when that's out of character for you. But if you're already a butthead, that's not out of character. So loss of good judgment, compulsive behaviors that you've never had before, suicidal thoughts and behavior and action, obsessive thoughts and behaviors, self-abuse or body neglect. Let's see here. Recurring nightmares, especially those that are like daydreams that you can't get out of, and they color your day. It's like, a constant thing, like you're in a daydream that you cannot get out of. Sleeping a lot, but awaking completely tired. I do that all the time, but it's not because of a possession. And recurring illness, chronic illnesses where normally somebody's been very healthy, an impending sense of doom, and just feeling drained and mortally tired. So, like I said, that's the big thing with possessions and everything like that. So many of those symptoms that I just read off can be attributed to many physical diseases and medical conditions, and they can be attributed to a lot of different psychological conditions. So my advice to anybody who thinks that they may have some type of, spirit oppression or anything like that is to first get tested for, medical issues, get diagnosed, get some help through mental illnesses and counseling and everything, and seek spiritual advice from, you know, somebody in your faith, because it's not usually paranormal in nature. And then you can always contact, you know, me. I can, you know, give you a little bit of advice. You can contact paranormal groups in your area to do an investigation on your home. But I will tell you that most paranormal groups will not do a clearing of a house because that is a minor rite of exorcism. They won't do exorcisms or anything like that. All they do is document information and then turn it over to, you know, a spiritual person who does exorcisms, whether, you know, it's a rabbi, you know, a father, a bishop, a Wiccan priestess, priest, whatever. And there's also another kind of possession, and that's actually, you know, a person, I'm going to say it's occult driven, and people do what is called necromancy. And this is very, you know, common in voodoo. It's common in very dark magic, where the person is summoning spirit to do their bidding, or summoning demons to do their bidding. And you can also get an attachment from somebody, a human, that is literally siphoning off your life energy. And those are very hard to detect. And they're not the easiest things in the world to get rid of either. But, you know, a spiritual leader wouldn't help you with that. You would have to have somebody that had experience in that type of thing and know how to teach you to shield yourself and get rid of that kind of problem. So with that said, that's it for Normal tonight. If you have any questions, shoot me a direct message. I'm happy to answer your question. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next Friday night. Y'all take care and be blessed in the light. Good night.